unmute that for us.
Hi, we are live. Welcome back, folks. This is Joint Justice Oversight. It is December the 17th, and we're beginning our afternoon meeting. We're going to start with DOC. Last couple meetings ago, we gave a challenge to both BSCA and DOC to come back separately with some brainstorming ideas in terms of how to deal with recruitment and retention of folks within corrections at our facilities as well as the field offices. So this afternoon, we're starting with the Commissioner of Corrections. So it's all yours, Commissioner. And give us your brainstorming thoughts, if any. And if you can just identify yourself for the record, too.
Sure. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Nick Dimel. I'm the Commissioner of Corrections for the state of Vermont. You should have before you a memo that we prepared at your request outlining the brainstorming that the department has done for both things that the department is and should be doing, as well as things that we would recommend our labor partners take up and get in the fight with us and help us out with.
We have the referee.
Sorry, stealing phrases from a past lifetime. So correctional agencies today face, I think, the most challenging circumstances in our history. The things that we're asked to do today are entirely different than they were even 10 years ago. We have, during this time, embraced transparency in our work. We've lifted the veil on our systems, boldly opened ourselves up to scrutiny. And this has, appropriately, I think, made us much better. We're more responsive to our communities. We're more responsive to our staff. We're more responsive to the people that we serve. But we're charged with housing people safely and securely. At our core, this has always been the mission of corrections. Today, though, the expectations have multiplied. Correctional systems are now tasked with healing, with educating, with training, with supporting, mentoring, treating those in our care. We're expected to provide health services, substance use treatment, education from elementary school through college, job and career training, nutritious meals, clean environments. And we're doing this while confronting rising costs and squeezing every ounce out of every dollar that we get from the general fund. We're expected to do more today than we ever have before, and we're doing it with fewer and fewer resources. And yet, this isn't our greatest challenge. The true challenge is that these expectations rest almost entirely on the shoulders of the corrections department and their staff, with too few partners willing to engage us and work with us in this process. Where we do find partners, it's often community-based organizations that are delivering critical services to our incarcerated population. And we, as a department, have fully embraced this. Correctional departments are not and should not become the primary educators, substance use treatment providers, domestic violence counselors. That's not our expertise. And we should not pretend that it is. Instead, we must, and we have as a department here in Vermont, opened our doors to skilled, caring professional partners who help us deliver services, who partner with us to solve problems and move our system forward. But when it comes to supporting our staff, we stand alone. It's one of the most frustrating things about this job for me. In my 3 years as commissioner, not one time has an organization outside of state government come to me and said, how can we help you support your staff? How do we improve their careers? How do we collaborate on recruitment and retention? Not one time, save for one organization called the Correctional Peace Officers Foundation, who came when an officer of ours was in crisis and offered to help them. Instead, we often face personal, misguided attacks on everything that we do. And many of that comes from our labor partners. They have not rolled up their sleeves to understand this problem. They have not offered constructive solutions, and they have not offered to support our workforce in the ways that they should. Instead, they've decried every plan we put forward. They oppose every proposal that we advance. They spread damaging stories about what it is like to be a correctional officer, how horrible it is. They tell people routinely through their messages. This does not help. It must stop. But that's their decision to make. I can't make that decision for them. What have we done? We have spent 3 years with this as our primary focus to improve the situation for staff and take care of the people who work in our system. We have invested heavily in this system. We've spent over $30 million above the budget on compensation alone in the last 3 years. We have redesigned a pay chart so that staff get faster pay raises and have higher base pay rates. Strangely, this gets left out of the conversation. BSEA agreed with it. It was bargained. This was our new contract of this year. That made those pay increases that were in the side letter. We made many of those increases in pay permanent, which means they will count for retirement, and they reward the hard work of the officers who work in our system. It was right that we did this, and I'm glad that we've gotten off of the side letters, which are temporary, to a permanent solution that increases pay to those who deserve it. We've changed our work schedules to try to create more work-life balance. We've invested in wellness resources, including peer support programs and on-staff clinical psychologists purely dedicated to taking care of our workforce. We've established the Central Operations Specialist Team, which has helped to alleviate the burden of hospital staffing, a major pain point in our system. We've designed a robust recognition program that spans all the way from town hall spotlights on staff, calling out good things that staff do on a monthly basis, to a formalized annual awards program that provides robust recognition of what staff have done over the last year. We hired a marketing firm to help us professionally recruit folks into our department. We created new positions at each facility called the Staff Experience Supervisor, a supervisor level position whose sole work is to try to improve the experience of a staff member at the facility. We've delayed mandatory overtime for new hires to increase retention amongst those that we are hiring. And we do these things because they are supported by the data. We know that this is where the pain points exist. We have studied this closely. And we've partnered with the Community College of Vermont to provide free community college education to every single member of the Department of Corrections, their spouse or partner, and their dependents. And with the exception of compensation, we have done all of this alone. So let me be clear. We are redesigning the state's correctional system to be more effective, to be more efficient, to firmly ground our work in our values. And I believe that the cornerstone of this vision is building the best correctional workforce in the United States. To do that, we have to hire, we have to retain. Importantly, though, we need to cultivate and we need to care for the people who work here. So I welcome anyone who wants to join us in this effort. But this department will not wait for people to get on board. We are going to keep moving forward, even if we have to do it alone, and they can join us when they're ready. So with that, I'm happy to take your questions.
Yes, Commissioner. I wonder if you could expand upon, I asked Mr. Howard a question this morning in reference to the elimination of overtime.
Yes, sir.
I'm not quite sure that was answered. So what I was looking for here, referring to the 12-hour shift, well, why is that?
Yeah, so under the previous schedule model, folks were paid overtime after an 8-hour shift. And then 40 hours in a week. If you had cumulative 40 hours of work, you get paid overtime. When we changed the shift schedule, which BSEA agreed to and bargained and is now in the contract, we moved to overtime after 12 hours of work. I forget the hour amount, a work week, but in an 80-hour work week over a two-week pay period, which is how the state pays employees, functionally staff get overtime after 80 hours or so. However, there's built in, I believe, 6 to 8 hours of overtime in the work week. So you're really compensated for 70 something hours at regular time. Anything above that is overtime. So for folks who are working 2-week pay period, say they work 100 hours, 28 or 6 of that is overtime. So basically just change the way that overtime is calculated over a 2-week pay period. So folks are getting overtime. That's long been a foundational element of the collective bargaining agreement.
Bill?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner Demmel, I was wondering, were you able to see Steve Howard's testimony earlier, especially what he began with, a set of statistics about the drop in numbers of COs at various facilities?
Yes, sir, I was.
Do you dispute those numbers, or are they accurate?
Well, what I would say is I haven't had a lot of time to digest those numbers, so forgive me. But what I would say is, although the raw numbers do appear accurate, it's painting quite an incomplete picture. So let me give you some examples. Across all facilities in March, we had 332 correctional officer 1 positions. Of those, to this date, we've retained 74%. Of the CO1s those 322 that we had on March 7th, 61% remain CO1s. 26% left the department entirely, but 10% of those folks promoted into a new job, CO2. Another 1% promoted into other positions in the facilities, like the staff experience supervisor position, and the remaining moved to other positions within DOC, but outside of correctional facilities. So while it's true that those numbers shifted during that time, it doesn't capture the fact that many folks stayed within the correctional agency, just moved to a different role.
So I guess my question is, do you characterize the current personnel situation as a crisis of any kind, or does it seem normal and functional?
No, nothing about this is normal or functional. Let me be very clear, and I've said this for 3 years now. This is a staffing crisis. We're in the midst of a deep, profound staffing crisis, both in the corrections department in the state of Vermont, but also broadly across our state government. And if you look at correctional agencies across the country, this exact same trend is happening everywhere. Now, we were in a worse crisis in July of 2022 when our vacancy rate was over 32%. Since that time, we were able to cut it in half, and it is slowly ticking back up percent by percent. Today, I think we're just under 18%. That is a major crisis. I don't think any organization is healthy that has a nearly 20% vacancy rate. Certainly not a 30% vacancy rate or higher. But we have made major changes to our system in the last 3 years, and particularly on the staffing side in the last 2 years, that have materially altered the vacancies that we have. If we were at a 10% vacancy rate in security staff, I would still be ringing the alarm bells. But I think we also have to capture in this problem set, not just that pay is going to solve the problem. It won't, though folks do deserve to be paid for the immense amount of work that they're putting in. We have to understand the demographic changes in this state. We have to understand that the workforce is shrinking rapidly. And that's exacerbated in Vermont, where we have an aging population. We have to understand the facilities themselves, what it's like to work in these facilities, what the experience of a correctional officer is like. And we can't expect by adding $1 or $2 an hour to their salary, it is going to change their experience at work. Until we are willing to fundamentally get in and change this system, we will continue to have these problems, whether we pay them $10 more an hour, $100 more an hour. Folks are still going to leave because these are difficult places to work. Paying double time right now, we can debate the merits of that, and we certainly will during the collective bargaining process. But that doesn't add new staff to our ranks. It doesn't make the situation better at work. So while we talk about compensation, we also need to talk about the workplace and the experience of folks at work.
Commissioner, if I could
Sure.
just tell you where I'm going with this. So
Yep.
I understood the committee's challenge. It was that the SEA would come in with brainstormed options, and so would you. I haven't heard any brainstormed options yet. other than a backward look at what you have done and pride in that work, which is fine. Going forward, you've indicated that it's a crisis to you. It's twice the vacancy rate that you would describe as ringing an alarm bell. What is the administration prepared to do radically differently now, given that situation? In other words, what are your bullet points or whatever you've got to show us?
That's a very good question. So as far as what we would recommend VSEA support, we detailed that in the memo, and I don't want to sit and read through all of that. Certainly, I'm happy to talk through that if you would like. But you asked, what would the department, what would the administration do radically different now? That work is underway. So about 9 months ago, we released our strategic plan. It's the first time the department has ever had a strategic plan in its history. And the first plank, there are 4 sections to the plan. The first section, and there's a reason that it's first, is the plan to attack the staffing challenges that we're facing. That plan outlines and has been shared with BSEA and our staff robustly. That plan outlines the radical approach that we're taking to change the correction system. And there's a couple of pillars that kind of anchor this work. One of it is compensation, but I think we've talked enough about that. It's making sure that the pay is commensurate with the experience and that staff are provided the compensation they deserve. Beyond that, though, it focuses on increasing, elevating the profession itself. And so that's training supervisors to adapt to the new realities of supervising the folks that we have in our system. Steve mentioned this morning that folks leave because of the overtime, and he's not wrong. I think that's absolutely true. The other reason, though, that the exit interviews that we routinely review show us is they leave because of their supervisor. If you have a bad boss, you don't keep working there. And so that's an area where we focused heavily. We redesigned our entire training scheme for supervisors. We introduced the new supervisor ranks. That work is ongoing. And one of the things that we're focused on heavily in the supervisor issue right now is supervisors say they have too much work to do, so they don't have time to go talk to the people they're supervising. But you can't supervise somebody you're not talking. So we're working on trying to decrease the workload, automate as much as we can, but free up time for supervisors to go do that in-person supervision, to increase the connection. Hear what is a problem area for a correctional officer.
And if I just interrupt, I'm sorry, my time is limited before I have to turn it over to others. But so in other words, I hear you saying reducing the workload on the supervisors, which would cut against the 16-hour days for the corrections officers. What are you doing specifically to cut the 16-hour workday and the mandatory overtime for those folks? What is the strategy? It seems like maybe it's supervisors are not, helping to retain, but it sounds like the work-life balance issue built around a 16-hour day is what's killing things. What is the plan immediately, not going forward over years, but to cut that 16-hour workday?
Well, so what the data would show you is we don't have a recruitment problem. We're actually quite good at recruiting. So we're bringing in far more folks than we ever have in our history. The next academy will be twice the size of a normal academy. But we're losing them as fast as we bring them in. And so the question is, well, what would it take to retain somebody? And what they're experiencing are very difficult work environments. Supervisors, I have to return there because I do think it's a linchpin in this whole process. Supervisors who are not coaching, mentoring, cultivating their staff. And that's not their fault. They've been overloaded. We haven't provided them the proper training. I'm not putting that on the supervisors. I'm saying that's where the department needs to invest heavily. But I also just have to flag for you, Senator, there isn't a workforce that we're going to go out and capture and bring in, and all of a sudden we have enough folks almost no matter what we do. So that doesn't mean we shouldn't keep targeting this and trying to move the needle, but it requires us to think about the way we actually run the system. How do we use our staff? How many staff do we need to do a task? Because this workforce demographic issue we're not in a blip in time. the workforce is going away in Vermont. We know this, the data is very clear. There's not a whole new workforce that's going to come fill in all the gaps that we're missing. So that means, how do we do the job with fewer people? And so we're going to have to adjust the practice of corrections, how you actually staff a facility. That's difficult given our infrastructure. That's something we're going to have to grapple with. But there are ways that we are going to have to change so that somebody isn't working 16 hours forever. And so that's a large part of the work that we're doing right now, to try to modernize the system, to change the way we practice the work that we're doing in Vermont. And I think that's also what other states are looking at, knowing that we're not going to recruit our way out of this problem, and we're losing folks faster than we can gain.
Well, but, and this is my last comment, I thought the assignment was to come in with ideas for recruitment and retention as a way of dramatically scaling up the workforce and reducing the workload for those individuals. I hear you saying the workforce has gone away, we're going to have to do more with the people we have. I don't think that's a helpful or a optimistic direction.
Yeah, I don't think we need to do more with the people we have. I think we need to do the work fundamentally differently than we have in the past. I think part of the problem is we've asked these folks to do more and more and more and not added to the ranks over time. And now we're at a place where it's cracking. And we haven't done the fundamental work to change the system. And, you know, you can't flood a correction system with new folks, even if they existed, and expect you're going to get a good result. We do need to be thoughtful about who we recruit and how we train them. But again, this isn't a recruitment issue for us. We are recruiting very well. It's a retention issue. We lose many folks within their first year of employment, and we can show you that data when they're leaving, that we have the arc pretty well monitored. And so we're creating strategies to target, like, well, what would it take to keep you 1 pay period longer, 2 pay periods longer, 6 months longer? We know if we can keep a new recruit 1 year, the likelihood they stay for multiple years goes up exponentially. Okay, how do we get people to stay a year? Those are the strategies that are outlined in our strategic plan, and I'd encourage you to look at that. I think it answers many of the questions you're asking.
Thank you.
So we have a couple more questions. Topper and then Jenny.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, thanks for coming in, Commissioner. We heard about a model that is practiced or in practice in Texas. Is that something that your department has considered?
I didn't catch the first part of the question, sir. Do you mind?
We heard this morning about a model of running a correctional system that was like a passive model. And I was wondering if you know of that, and have you considered it? Because you're talking about having to maybe change the way that the correction system is run. So I wonder if you've looked at that.
Okay, I understand. Thank you. So I know the director in Texas quite well, and our data teams have a very close partnership with a couple of other states to try to monitor this work. I'm not aware of Texas having any type of passive system. I have to correct the record from Steve this morning. I don't believe they're on the 223 schedule. That's not been our testimony. What I've testified to in the past is that if you zoom out and look at the trends around correctional staffing across the country, you can look at Texas, Michigan, you can look at Utah, other states. All the trends are exactly the same. Doesn't matter how big the system is. It doesn't matter what solutions they've thrown at the problem. The data mirrors itself. And you couldn't think of 2 states that are more different than Texas and Vermont. Size, population, sentencing laws, staffing patterns, all of it. And so that tells me something. That tells me this problem is much bigger than just a problem in one place or one small discrete issue. This is a major system problem that the national correctional systems are experiencing. However, I would want to answer a bit of your question, and that is, are there solutions that we can apply to help alleviate the burden on staff? And there absolutely are. And so that's something the department is exploring. That also is detailed in our strategic plan, but I'll give you some previews. We're looking at ways to automate tasks. what could be done with technology that is currently done with people so that we can save our human resources, the people resources we have for the real problems that we have. An example would be perimeter security. There are solutions that are available in technology that would help us do a better job of perimeter security instead of having an officer drive around the outside of our building, which is a kind of a porous security process to begin with. There are ways that we could monitor individuals who are incarcerated better so that we don't have to do 15-minute observation checks, which are a really onerous process that our staff have to go through where they're constantly touring a unit so that it could free them up to do other things. So I do think there are technology answers to some of these problems, but I've said it in the past. There's no one thing that's going to fix this. We've got to create a comprehensive strategy. And I think so far as I've seen, the department's the only one who's put together a plan that actually attacks this problem from every angle. I'm not saying it's the perfect plan, but it is comprehensive. It has a lot of thought put into it. It's been peer reviewed outside of Vermont. And so we're going to continue moving forward on that and advancing this work.
Madam Chair, if I could just continue one. So I have to admit, I have not read the strategic plan. I will read it. Does it help the situation where these correctional officers are working it appears to be a tremendous amount of hours in a week? Does that strategic plan deal with that problem?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, that's the goal, is to draw down the number of hours folks are working. In a perfect world, we would execute our 50-50 schedule, and folks could pick up overtime as desired, but not mandatory. I think that's the perfect world. We are not there yet. We're not near there, but that is the goal that we are working.
Okay, so that's the goal. It's been the goal for a while too. Okay, I appreciate your response.
I think it has theoretically been the goal for a while. I don't think really until about 2.5 years ago when we built out a data team to go in and really study this problem. I don't think we understood the problem. I think there are still pieces we don't understand. We just learned within the last year that we lose folks the fastest in the first 3 months, second fastest in the first 6 months. But we also learned if we can keep them one pay period longer, they're more likely to stay. Well, people might say they knew that, but there was no data to show that. Now we know that precisely. So that's how we create these targeted solutions then. Okay, get the staff experience supervisors out into the facilities and have them go around and chat with people. Hey, what would keep you here one more pay period? What would it be that we could do differently that would help you through the workday? What's going on at home? And then you keep them a pay period. And they show that there's support there. There's partnership there. Then you keep them another pay period. And now we've got somebody for a month. Well, we only need to do that 12 more times. And we got them a year. Those seem like really simple things, but it's hard to achieve that. And we are beginning to turn the needle on that work, but only because we've started to study this very closely and because we've gone outside and asked people, how do you do it? How do you do it in hospitals? How do you do it in other correctional agencies around the country? And this is an area where I think states, Vermont included, have not invested heavily in trying to staff their correction system. I think we thought we could just do it the way it used to be done. And what we've seen is that started failing Vermont in 2015. We started down this path in 2015 with the correctional staffing patterns, and we have never recovered, and the pandemic just made it worse. But that's the work we've taken on. And so I know that folks have talked about this problem for a while, but I don't think folks were serious about solving it until the last few years.
So we have another committee question, Jenny?
Gina, I've never been called that one.
No,
Okay.
I have a Gina on my committee, sorry.
Okay. Well,
Jenny,
thank you. And thank you, Commissioner. It seems like there is a lot going on, and your plan for systemic reform is something that you're very passionate about. So appreciate that. I'm gonna move to what I heard from Steve Howard this morning, and one of the correctional facility guys was driving home and fell asleep at the wheel while talking with his wife. And others are so exhausted at the end of the week of their 16-hour days that they can't do the work. If someone came into your office and told you about this, what solution would you suggest for them so that their work-life balance is livable?
Yeah, so we heard this issue a couple of years ago as well. And so we do provide hotel accommodations for staff that are working the long shifts so that they can go to a nearby hotel and rest. That type of work, I think, is good, but the uptake isn't huge. Some folks do take advantage of that program, and I'm glad they do, but understandably, and I probably would feel this way, I'd like to get home to my family rather than staying at the hotel. So we've worked on some of the solutions to address that kind of immediate issue. Like, can we give them some option to help them when they have worked long hours, they're exhausted, et cetera. And I think, unfortunately, the bigger solution is one that takes this kind of study and then investment. But I think we have spent our resources in the right places. Unfortunately, I think that there's only it's a supply and demand issue. There's only two ways to draw down the number of hours folks are working. You get a lot more staff in your system, or you do something differently for how the system's run so it doesn't require as many staff to run it. And I think that, like I said, we're attacking both sides. We're trying to capture both sides of those at the same time, but there aren't the same number of people they were historically. So the supply of available people is down. And I think, we have a lot of forces working against us at the same time. And some of that's demographics, some of it's the state of the economy. There's a lot of jobs available. Folks are also being attracted to other jobs. So trying to make ourselves a preferred employer is a top priority.
I did hear you say that you had more folks than ever in training right now, and that you might see an increase in the number of available staff in the near future. It sounded like near future. And then I also heard this morning from VSEA, or from Steve Howard, that there were suggestions being made for how to reduce staffing needs in the correctional facilities by maybe moving people around or having fewer check-ins for those who are who need less or might require less.
Yeah.
And have you considered some of those suggestions? I mean, are you willing to consider the suggestions that were brought to us today by Steve Howard and others?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So if I were the person coming in with my 16-hour and you told me that, well, this is what we're going to try next week, a pilot program in this particular facility, so this won't happen again, because I know you're a single parent and you don't want to go to a motel. I mean, there's all of these things that I've heard that are, critical for people's welfare. So I'm coming from the health and welfare perspective, as you can imagine.
Yep.
So just your thoughts there.
Sure. Yeah. So a couple of the ideas that I heard from Steve this morning, reduce our population by putting people out on furlough, or not revoking folks on furlough. I mean, a couple of things to that. The amount of reduction in population we would need would have to be pretty big for it to actually impact the number of staff we need. But we also have the lowest furlough number that we've ever had, I think, since furlough was introduced in Vermont. So there aren't many more folks to put out. That was a result of the justice reinvestment work that was done in 2019. The revocations of folks on furlough follow now an evidence-based grid. And we don't want to depart from that, because that's what got us into trouble in furlough in the first place. We're revoking people too often. So, we try to balance those needs, but like I said, we have the lowest furlough population we've ever had. And so further reductions in that, I just don't think are, going to work, frankly. But it's an interesting idea. That's something we've contemplated too, is The other side of the supply demand issue is if you just had fewer people to supervise, could you do it with fewer people? Theoretically, but the number of people you'd have to get out of your system are pretty big. The best idea I think I heard from Steve this morning was this concept of rotating staff while they're on shift. That's something we're studying very closely. We think that's a great idea because it creates some diversity in the workplace. So folks aren't stuck at one post the entire evening. If we do roll out a pilot on that type of project, I hope it won't be challenged to the labor board because it's probably a bargainable issue. Those posts are bidded by correctional staff, but that's not going to stop us. We will try to negotiate or work through that issue. I think it's a great idea to get folks moving around a facility. The other concept that we've talked about is teaming up. So instead of having a correctional officer by themselves, you have a team of correctional officers, 2 or 3 folks, and they do the work together. At least that gives you some of the socializing and kind of camaraderie partnership that could help you through a long shift or an overnight shift, which can be kind of, slow and boring, frankly, because everybody is locked in. The other one that I like, and I'd be happy to talk to VSEA more about this, and I would hope they would propose it in the legislature and in the collective bargaining space, is this concept of childcare. I've got a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old, and I know quite well the difficulties of trying to establish childcare and maintain it, and what you do when the kid is sick, and all these other things that go along with having little ones. I don't have the authority to roll out childcare for the Department of Corrections. So, when we talk about those things, things that are truly benefits for the employee, we have to be thoughtful about who actually has the capacity to make that happen. But I do think it's an area that we've talked about in our discussions. Along those kind of like lifestyle things, there's other things. We have a lot of employees who live in New York, and we've heard requests from staff for a long time trying to get discounted ferry passes or free ferry passes to get across the lake. Again, that has some hurdles because it wouldn't be robustly available to the entire state workforce. It would only be available to certain people. But those are concepts that I think we need to build into this process. You'll see some of that in our plan. But again, if we got childcare online tomorrow, would it solve our staffing problems? Probably not, but it could help chip away at some of it. And when we do a bunch of things in aggregate, then they start to move the needle in a big way. So I think there are some good ideas there that are worthy of further exploration. Some of that's already in work, and some we'd be happy to engage with BSCA and others.
Thank you.
So I guess the question is, some of those ideas, really good ideas. How as legislators can we be assured that they would be vetted and try to be implemented?
How do you mean?
Well, you're not going to need legislative input or legislative change. You're not going to need statute changes. So how as legislators can we be assured that both parties would be coming to the table and really talking through some of those possible initiatives that doesn't need legislative work, either funding or statute changes?
Yeah, well, the commitment of the department that this remains our top priority, and we are constantly adding and investing to our plan. We'll continue to do that. There's no good idea that we'll turn away from. We will try to explore even the bad ones if we think it'll help. Much of this, I think a large part of what Steve talked about this morning are collective bargaining issues. Those are things that can be brought to the table and negotiated over, but that's not something we can do in a public forum. It's not something we can do with the legislature. So, we're always open to new ideas there. I think there are non-starters, though. I don't see the state going back to the side letter agreements. Those are, it was expensive and it wasn't permanent. And so they're Band-Aid solutions that aren't actually getting to the underlying problems that we're talking about. We took the good parts of the collective bargaining agreement, we built those in permanently for staff. And I think that was the right thing to do. And I'm glad we all agreed to that. But the bargaining table is another place where some of these ideas can be brought. It would take a major change in the state to offer childcare to state employees. I don't know what that would look like or where that would start, whether it be in the legislature, or the administration, or with our labor partners. So some of these things, are bigger than me, us, the department, the folks in this room, and would need, a public conversation about. And again, at the end of the day, all of that combined may not move the needle where we need it to. I don't think it will, frankly. So we need to think about doing the work differently than we have in the past. And I can't be more clear about that. This system cannot be run the way it was 5, 10, 15 years ago. It just isn't, we're not tooled right for the future that we're experiencing.
And we've been focused on recruitment retention of folks within our correctional facilities, but also you have your field offices. And what is happening out there in staffing with your field offices? We've been all focused on correctional officers within a facility, but there's also pressure, I'm sure, for folks, we call them the old PMP offices, but that's your staffing too. So what are some of the pressures there, or are there no pressures there? Is it just in the facilities?
Forgive me for looking at my phone, but I wanted to give you the right number. So today in the field, we have a 7.2% vacancy rate. Field being our probation parole staff, and our administrative staff who work in our district offices. That space doesn't experience the same vacancies that the facilities do. Totally different work environments. You can understand why that would be different. They do experience pressures though, and particularly over the last 4 or so years, that pressure has been covering hospitals while incarcerated individuals are taken to the hospital on an emergency visit and then for the duration of their stay. We created the Central Operations Specialist team to dig away at that problem, and that has worked immensely. So much so that while it was opposed originally, now VSEA has asked us to build it out, make it bigger, do more with it. So that's a good sign in my mind. If they're supporting it, then I think that means we're headed in the right direction. We both agree on something. We are looking at that problem right now a little bit differently, and not to get too far over my skis here, but the hospital coverage is one piece of the pressure, but the question in my mind and that we're studying is, are there other things that duties could be taken off that would alleviate the burden on the facility and the field, and could be centralized so that it's managed by a different structured team. And again, I don't want to get too far into that, but similar thought process to creating the central operations team to cover hospital coverage. What other duties are really onerous for the facilities? While we're on the hospital coverage topic, an example of that would be prearranged medical visits. So if Springfield, the facility in Springfield didn't have to take everybody out for their prearranged hospital visits, but that COS team did that instead, then you'd have more staff in the facilities to do the facility work. And we want to get to a place where our field isn't doing hospital coverage. That's not what we hired them for. Strangely enough, VSEA submitted a class RFR this year to change the probation officer class, and they added that as a duty of probation officers now. So we don't plan to exercise that because I don't think that's what probation parole officers should be doing. But we got to bring down the pressure on all the folks, but we don't have the same vacancy pressure that we do in the field.
Thoughts, questions? Topper?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner, as people, you made the statement that as quick as you hire people, a lot of the people are leaving. On those exit interviews that take place, and I assume they do, people are giving you they're telling you the reasons why they're leaving. Can you share with the committee some of the things that you've changed because of those exit interviews?
Yeah. I mean, I think we've talked a little bit about it. So when we do exit interviews, there's really almost exclusively 2 things that are raised in those interviews. One is the overtime and the work-life balance issue, and the other is their supervisor. And so that's really telling for me. I mean, those are areas that we need to focus in on. So it gets back to those are 2 of the primary areas we're focused on is how do we try to draw down the workload And how do we improve our supervisor rank? And I think the other reason to focus on the supervisors is our staff is very young now. It's much younger, and I mean in terms of seniority, probably also age, but in this instance, I mean in terms of seniority, the system is being run by folks with much less years of service, much fewer years of service than in the past. And so supervisors are critical to coaching and mentoring and making sure they're doing the job the way they're supposed to. But it also gives us an opportunity to kind of turn the corner and introduce a new type of supervision of our staff into the system, so that we do promote a healthier workplace, that we do have, we work a lot on generational differences in the workplace. Corrections largely only hiring millennials and Gen Z right now. And the things that those generations want out of their workplace are majorly different than the two generations that preceded them. But we're tooled for that other generation, those other two generations. We need to retool and focus on the folks that we're actually bringing into our system. And they want technology at work. They want a connection to their mission, impact. Those are the things that we need to focus on. They want a supervisor who actually talks about their performance.
Phone call.
So,
Phone
so,
call.
Madam Chair, if I could
Yes.
just finish, Commissioner, with all due respect, could you answer the question? What have you or has the department done based on the information that you just gave us? The overtime and the other reason for leaving? What have you done? I mean, we've talked about that. We know that's a problem and it's still a problem. So what have you done based on that information that you got from people that were leaving? Because that may be the solution to your problem. If you've got all kinds of people coming in and you're talking about you need to structurally change the correction system, can you tell us what you've done to do that?
Well, I think that's what we've been talking about today. We've made major structural changes to our system. We changed the schedule because we know those generations are saying they need more work-life balance. We know the schedule we went to will offer them that. We have introduced the staff experience supervisors to help connect with people on a human level in our facilities, because we know that is one of the primary reasons they're leaving. They don't feel connected, they're working too much, and while they might like the mission is crushing them. So, I mean, I can send you the list again. It's also detailed in our memo, but we have taken many specific strategies and put them in place, and this work isn't done. The plan goes on to 2030, so we will continue to work on this. But that is driven by the feedback that we're getting from staff, either via the exit interviews. We also do stay interviews, so not just waiting until somebody's leaving, but while they're still working here. What's keeping you here? What's making you think about leaving? And using that to drive some of our decision making. I'll also mention, beyond those two tools, we do now annual surveying of our staff, just the department, aside from the other statewide surveying that's done, to really target these questions with staff and figure it out. And that is mirrored, the data we collect there and the information we get from staff is mirrored from when I go walk around the facilities and talk to folks. It's the same, I'm hearing the same story. And so, I think I've tried to answer your question, but there are a number of specific proposals that are detailed in the memo, but also this conversation today, we've largely focused on those two issues. How do we draw down the amount of work people are having to do? And that's the supply and demand issue I was talking about. And how do we improve the experience for staff at work, particularly as it relates to their supervisor?
Okay, so here's my reaction, sir. You've got the information. You say you've acted on it. You've tried different things. But what I'm hearing is the problem is still there. So
Certainly.
Evidently what's been happening is not working.
Well, I disagree with you on that. We had a 32% vacancy rate. We're just over 17% today. So it has worked. But what I'm telling you is that we will not get to a 0% vacancy rate. The people do not exist to make that happen. And so we need to fundamentally retool this system and I think probably other systems in the state as well, to address the current situation facing the workforce in Vermont and how we attract people to really difficult human service oriented jobs. And this is true of our law enforcement partners around the state. It's true of the other human service agencies around the state. It's true of our mental health providers, our hospital systems. It's true of our designated agency system. This is not unique to corrections, but I think that, plan for plan, I think the Department of Corrections has the most comprehensive plan to address the staffing of any agency, department, nonprofit in the state. And I would sit and debate that all day. So I'd encourage you again to go read that.
Well, definitely. I agree with you that all the other agencies that you talked about in private business, they're not able to get people. But what you told us is you don't have a problem recruiting. You got plenty of people. You just can't keep them there.
Yeah, I agree. It is not a recruitment issue, it's a retention issue.
And that's a nut we've been trying to crack for many, many years for that. Frustrating. The questions? Comments? Well, I don't know if this got us anywhere, but at least we had a conversation, and I'm sure it's going to continue during the legislative session. I don't have a silver bullet to solve this. I don't think anyone does. Jenny?
Just a quick question. Obviously, you've brought up childcare, and that's something that we have worked on over the past few years and made, big steps for providing childcare for folks. Are you making any recommendations from your department to the governor for within the budget to accelerate the availability of childcare for DOC employees?
Well, I think the challenge that we experience is the state, and I think VSEA also, I don't want to speak for them, but I think would be reticent to provide benefits to some state employees that aren't available to others. And so
But that's not my question. I understand that. It's all becomes part of a negotiation, but are you dealing with the agency of administration about some dialogue to have accessible childcare for DOC? And it may be more than just DOC, but seems like a really important conversation, particularly since we heard that so many of the employees are single parents. So I'm just, what, if anything, are you doing to take the plan a step above?
yeah, so
Yeah.
we have explored childcare as well as some of those other kind of specific benefits that we could provide. The ferry pass, some type of housing voucher, those types of ideas, the things that really hold people back from being able to come and work in Vermont. We have included those in our proposals and strategy sessions. There's, I think, some really difficult structural limitations there that I think that those types of proposals are really difficult to kind of get included in a package because of the way that our employment process is structured. So we do think about those, we include those. We've tried to map out all of the pain points that a correctional officer might experience that either keeps them working with us or would push them away from working with us. And we've tried to map all that out. I think we have a pretty comprehensive map of that. It's the solution making that becomes really challenging there.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Like committee? Anything, Commissioner?
I have a couple of thoughts about the letter draft that you have.
Okay, are you available to wait to do that, or do you need?
Yeah.
Because I want to get to
Okay.
that before it's too late here. And the heat's
Oh
on.
my goodness.
So
I hadn't noticed.
All of a sudden, the heat's on. You must be
79.6.
You're
I'm sorry to call my.
I like moved my computer and stuff. Yeah.
It's like all of a sudden, I was.
I didn't say God. I didn't say God, damn it.
I feel like the two. Yeah, so we'll get that.
I guess they got the heat fixed. This room used to be. Refrigeration. No, Megan told us it was going to be cool in here. That's been. I did not feel that way. Well, after lunch.
I don't know, see, just like visiting.
We turned down the paintings there, right?
Be careful, Commissioner. Sure. Holding this alternative wall, now we're just waiting with.
Right, all in one fell swoop. Woo. Anyway. So we need some data in terms of our justice, I can't think, reinvestment initiatives, just to see where our dollars are going and see how effective it has been.
That's my fault.
Have you muted yourself?
That is what I am working on.
Yes, I am now muted. So it's to collect some of the data to see how effective we have been. That will then help us how we move forward. And it sort of ties into the previous conversation we had this morning again about the amount of dollars. It's like 480,000, sometimes 500,000, sometimes 900,000. It gets reinvested. And how, what are the results? What are the outcomes of that? So Monica, I'm turning it over to you. And I know that Dr. Robin Joy's here too. Welcome. And you're the data guru. So I'll turn it over to both of you, and if you could identify yourself for the.
Sure, thank you. Thank you for inviting us. I'm Monica Weber. I'm the Executive Director of the Crime Research Group.
I'm sorry, I'm Dr. Robin Joy. I'm the Director of Research for Crime Research Group. And Representative Mifon, I am your constituent, just so you know that. Be nice.
Be nice. He may ask that of you.
So, so we're here to talk about the Act 40 report. And for those of you who don't know exactly who we are, the Crime Research Group, we are an independent nonprofit statistical and research organization. We also are contracted with the Department of Public Safety to provide what's called statistical analysis center services, where we collect data, report data, answer questions about the criminal justice system in Vermont, and also conduct a fair amount of research. And so Act 40 of 2023, as you referenced 20, you were talking about Section 2 this morning. Section 1 commissioned this report on criminal justice investment and trends. And you asked us as this Fiscal Analysis Center to collect these data and compile this report for you. Act 40 was very clear in what data we were supposed to collect and report. And so we have certainly done our very best to comply with what was written in the report. So I am going to share my screen. I believe Megan has given me that power. And great. So you can see on our webpage on this screen called Research Roundup is where we have posted the report. And we do have a little bit of an introduction to it here, just for readers to understand sort of the purpose of the report, a little bit about our methods. And I do want to point out that we received data extracts from multiple agencies across the criminal justice system. And every one of them were really helpful in terms of working with us to provide the data that we needed. Clearly, the Department of Corrections provided more data than the other departments in this report. We certainly want to thank them, but also thank all the other departments and agencies that worked with us to compile the report. You will see this little button over on the side screen here that says there's a PDF version. It's basically a summary and links back to all of these pages, but it also has our acknowledgements page and a few of the other parts of the report that aren't the data components of it. So there were some things on there about OMS updates at the Department of Corrections. And so we just put that in narrative. You'll see that in that section. However, the majority of the report and its findings are on each one of these sections that are broken down into individual reports where we've provided the data analysis and narrative for. So what we'd like to do is open up each one
A few
and
of
just
them.
brief a few. I mean, we just we know that we only have about half an hour here, so we can certainly pick and choose. I think there are some that we think are more important and
Yeah.
interesting, so we might go to those first and then talk to you a little bit about them, show you how to interact with them. So I don't know, Robin, which
Start at the
one did you
beginning.
start at the recidivism rate?
No, I was going to say start at the.
Arrests and
Arrest and
clearances.
information, yeah. So one of the things that we did and that we tried to do is a few years ago, perhaps Chair Lalonde may remember, he was in committee and said, I just want to reach into the cloud and get an answer. And so we've given you a cloud and an answer. We created all of these reports to be interactive. We tried to anticipate some of the questions that you may have asked or you have asked in the past. What's the good thing about this is that we want to draw your attention specifically to the sources that we're using, the data quality, and then very importantly to your work, the policies that are affecting the data that you're seeing. For a lot of these, the policies that are affecting the data are the COVID policies, right? And so we're looking at years from 2019 through to the end of fiscal year 2023,
Sometimes into 24.
sometimes
depends
into
on the
24,
data
depending on the
set.
data set. So COVID is in the middle of that. Yeah, so 2019 and early 2020, those are our base years, right? And that what we're seeing, our colleagues across the country, when they're looking at COVID and the impact of things, that for things like crime and corrections, that it's 2023 is the next new year, like, right? That's the post-COVID year. And so we're comparing that to the 2019, 2020. One of the things that's missing in this report, because you didn't ask us for it, is the judiciary. There's not a lot of judiciary data in here. There isn't a lot of, no impact on our caseloads going down because you're increasing restorative justice, programs. So for court, because I know it's important to you, we don't expect the courts to level out nationwide, never mind Vermont, into like 2024, 2025 to get past that COVID issue. So that's one of the big things. The other things have to do with data quality, how the data are kept, who's keeping the data, and what are the problems with the data. So we put that on every web page that we did, so you are aware. We're trying to be as transparent as possible and what the value is of the data. For the reports on crime trends and clearance rates, if you want to go down, Monica, to if you look at crimes, you can do, sorry, my old teacher habits.
A little bigger and all? I'm sure. Never mind.
Yeah, so you can choose here, crimes against, actually, Monica.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay, so if you choose crimes against, let's choose crimes so you can show that it works. Crimes against,
People.
go to property.
So you can.
So it'll change and you can see this is right, this week, this is what we all talked about last session. Here's your increase in your larceny offenses. If you scroll down, we just want to show you the functionality. You can now search, you can search for a specific property crime if you want to do retail thefts. Actually, I forgot how this in the data.
We'll find it. It's not in the retail.
Oh, I think I just did a big, never mind. You can search around, is what we're trying to say here. If you just did embezzlement, it would come up with embezzlement, but you can also play around with these up here, and you can sort. So if you want to see bribery is not a really common one, that's great. But you can see these are the number of incidents that were reported to the NIBR system during this period of time. Things that are missing from these data would be disorderly conducts, violations of conditions of release. So some of the big bulk of what we do in the criminal justice system aren't included in NIBRS. But you asked us to include NIBRS, so that's what we did. Clearance rates, the thing that I want to point out here, the larceny is going up. If you go to drug crimes, those are going down. That doesn't mean that people aren't using drugs. It just means that the crimes aren't maybe showing up and being reported to the police. Maybe they're being, maybe where the work that's being done with EMS is helping to reduce some of those calls to the police. So we don't know what it is. We just know that those are going down. So if you go crimes against
Yes,
society, you can see that, right?
So these, I don't know if you said this, Robin, but these categories, crimes against society, people and property, are the NIBRS categories.
Yes.
And so that's why we've included them, and everything and the crimes that are included in those larger categories. So that's why the drop down.
And we put in the fields here, we put in the things to know about the data. The FBI doesn't follow Vermont statutes. So what we call a domestic assault, which has its own statute, is covered here in assaults. I'd have to do a whole other analysis to get to the victim offender relationship to get to whether it was a domestic assault. NIBRS doesn't break down fentanyl possession versus fentanyl sale. It's all just drugs. They don't break those down like we do in our statute. So it's not a one-to-one, it's just a general, this is what's experiencing out there. And, there was nothing to our clearance rates. This is one of the things, our clearance rates are higher for crimes against the people, which is what we would like to see. Those are crimes of violence. Clearance rates for crimes against property are historically low because a lot of times we don't know who's committed the offense. So it's hard to arrest them if we don't know. And I think those were the big ones on this one.
It also just gives you a sense of how to
interact with
the
these
different
yeah.
tables, because most of the reports are in fact
that.
organized like that.
We'll go to bail next.
And then at the bottom of every report, you'll see the links. So they're the ones that you don't have to go back to our webpage.
Yeah.
You can just kind of go to the bottom and then click the next one and it'll come up.
So I know this one is one that a lot of people want. I'm going to tell you right now, please don't make any public policy right now off of these data. We got a new extract from the judiciary and we're working on sorting that out. We've reported some of that stuff here. The stuff that I'm not reporting are things that you want to know, but we aren't secure in our data to be able to report it. So we're not going to report out something bad. That's bad data that's going to make bad public policy. But a few things that we do want to point out here. One of the things, so you'll see up at the top, we say that it's published on November 25th. And that's because we've changed something. If you go all the way down to the bottom, you'll see if I change something, I'm going to tell you that I've changed something substantive here. And you'll see that at the version history. So if you ask me for something like, hey, can you add this chart? If we can add it, we'll add it, and then we'll change it in the version history so you know where we are. With this one, I think some of the interesting things about this, the data, I'm trying to think, go to bail amounts. All right, so these give you an idea of the bail amounts that were entered into Odyssey for various crimes. I broke these down by what I've heard you speak about. We can certainly look at these in different ways, but I just added, was there any violence on the case? Was there any felony on the case? Or was there any violations of conditions of release on the case? So just to give you an idea of how the bail are. If you go down to analysis of DOC.
Before, just quick question on that, and I know we're gonna have lots of time to ask these questions, but in that you could have overlap. It could be the same person in
Yes.
each of those categories.
Yes, absolutely, yeah. I wasn't, this was the first time we'd gotten these data from the judiciary, so let's play around and see what we can tell. One of the things we didn't do in this, but we have, is how the bail amount changes over time in a case. Does it go up? Does it go down? But that was a different, because you can have so many cases going on at once, trying to really sort that out, didn't have time to do it. We got these data very, very late in the process. I think what you're looking at is 2 weeks worth of work. When we did have information on demographics, we included it in there. I don't know why those aren't working. Oh, there we go. So if you want to look at bail amounts by race, you can do that. We didn't do bail amounts by gender on this one because there wasn't anything of note. Men still are overwhelmingly represented in the criminal justice system. And then with the DOC data, the chart. So DOC provided us with data on people who were held in detention. So now we're trying to look at 2 different data sets. We hope to be able to merge the judiciary data set with the DOC data set, but we can't do that right now. And then the distribution of persons during detention.
I just want to point out here, so like on this particular one, you asked, we did it geographically, so you'll be able to see. By each county, you'll be able to see what the charges are.
Yeah, the people who were detained.
Yeah, there's, again, brief overview, so we're just popping around here.
So is that the number of folks on that chart? And
That's, the number of people with that chart.
Number of
yes.
people in Addison County.
In Addison County.
so unique people, not, so the actual, there were 18 individuals.
Yes.
Chart, yeah.
Yes.
No,
That's-
it's the number of charges, it says up here.
Number of charges.
Just the number
Yes.
of charges.
And it's for that 5-year period.
It's for that 5-year
For
period.
that 5-year period, and
For Addison
again,
County.
to your point, the people, if they have multiple charges on their docket, they're gonna appear. So this would be the most, the number of
Yes.
petty larcenies.
Yeah. So it's this next one that's interesting, the next, the graph.
This one?
Yeah. So this is, here you're going to be able to select a crime, and this is how long people are being detained for. And again, you can be in different parts, right? You can have multiple different charges at the same time, so a person can be here once. But what is the interesting part is that most people are being released within 24 hours, sometimes within the same day. And when you look at all the bed days, so this is out of the people who were held for violation of conditions of release, or who were detained at least a little bit, 1,181 of them were held for 1 day only. So that means they clicked over the 24-hour period in DOC's data. If it's 0, and I think this one right here is 0, yeah, the 661, go up to the 600, 600. Next one.
Yeah.
Those people weren't even held for 24 hours. Right, so somebody's coming in, DOC is processing them, and then they are being released within 24 hours. And it could be, we don't know why, we want to be really clear about that. It could be that they've gone to court at this point and the judge has released them. It could be a lot of things. The other thing we want to be really careful about are these folks that are over here for 1,500 and 2,000 days. It doesn't mean that they couldn't afford bail for that time. We don't know. It could be that they were being held for some other reason and paying the bail was not going to make a difference on whether they were going to get out. Yeah. So there was no reason, right? You don't have to, if you're not going to get out, why are you going to pay the bail? So, those are some further research questions that we weren't able to answer this first go around. I want to be really clear on that.
So that N.
Yeah.
And that one, is that charge or is that person?
It's one person.
One person.
One person. Yeah.
This chart is by person.
Yeah. And one other thing you can do with these charts, so you can do the top, yeah. So you can zoom in, you can you can download that picture, and if you want to email it to somebody, or you can send them to the website, you can play around with it. So you can do all of that as well. And I think the last two that I want to do are the returns.
Returns. Yeah, very interesting one. People be interested in this.
Well, if you're ever bored at home, you want to try to fill in some time, you go to your website, play around.
Well, I mean, don't waste your board.
Yeah.
I've already played with this.
I mean,
You live it.
Yeah, all right, so returns, right? This was justice reinvestment, having to deal with the returns to incarceration and sorts of other things. So if we go down to my favorite charts.
we've talked about this.
Yes. So first of all, actually, let's go to this one, the top one. There you go, yeah, this one. So what I did here is I just looked at how many times is the same person being returned, right, during the study period. Most people are being returned once. Some people, very few, are being returned 10 times. So this is a new way of kind of looking at it. We generally just talk about returns as just returns, but how many people are being returned again and again? And that's a very small amount. And it's only a few people are being, most people are being returned once or twice. And so, that's important to keep in mind when we look at these returns. Now, this period again covers 2019 through 2023, 2024. They gave me these data were kept on spreadsheets, just to be clear, that these weren't in OMS, they are in OMS now.
Yes.
Yes. So these were spreadsheets that were kept in the field, and like spreadsheets, they're messy. And so we did what we could. You can see this is, they gave me the actual date. I know that especially those of you on the finance committees, you look at quarters, state fiscal year quarters and fiscal years. But human beings don't operate in that world, right? Our society operates on this January 1st to December 31st calendar. And so sometimes those dates are more important and for policy than the actual fiscal year. So when I could use regular dates, I did. And of course, you can see the COVID years, right? Right. So there's the drop in the returns. And these are the numbers of returns that the DOC is processing daily. And so if you think about that from the workload perspective, they're processing 10 returns a day across the state. What does that involve, including the people that they're now, holding, et cetera? It's just an interesting way we thought to look at it. Yes.
The reasons for returns.
The reasons for returns. So this is where you can actually see some of the work that you guys have done. Right, prior to justice reinvestment and also prior to COVID, right? Because those things kind of kick in at the same time. The returns for violations daily are right here. Yeah. And then when we get up to 2023, 2024, you see that it's much, much lower, that the use of absconsion has increased within the department. So that becomes the reason. And that's a new reason that they kind of began. It's not a new reason.
It's a clarification of the policy and making sure that absconders are being properly categorized. So yes, it is something that you did. So this is what you will see.
This is what you will see
because of that policy.
Here's your public policy in a chart that shows the impact that your policy had. And so, this is, again, so we're looking at 2023, 2024 to see what's going to happen post-COVID. Things are starting to increase, but again, it's too soon to, your constituents obviously feel things are increasing. As a statistician, I'm going to just say, I'm waiting, but, I don't argue with people's feelings.
The other thing we want to say here is that we did, we send all of these back to the Department of Corrections. They reviewed them. One of the things that they have done is looked up all of these unknowns.
Yeah.
Now they provided us with that information, but we haven't been able to update it. So that's one of the
updates
that we are going to update. So you would expect to see that
that will get cleared up. Yeah.
So I just wanted to point that out to you.
And then the next one we did on this one, just so they can see by field office. Yeah. And then this tells you the amount of returns by day by field office. And so you can see that, really Burlington and Barry up here are the ones that were most affected by justice reinvestment, at least. Middle Bennington right here kind of stays the same throughout the whole time. St. Johnsbury was well, you described St. Johnsbury during COVID.
Well, the St. Johnsbury field office and the Department of Corrections could certainly say this better than I can, but during the pandemic, the St. Johnsbury field office was very much involved in helping out with the facility. You may recall that facility was the first one to have a real outbreak, and so that office had very minimal operations during that time. I mean, they were operating, but it was still pretty.
So, and then the last one, do the return by behavior classification. Yeah. And so here you can see where DOC starts changing some of the classifications, so that as we go farther out in time, this will start to level out. But it's important to see that they've changed the language they've used to describe
because of
the policy. Yeah.
Because
Specifically, the policy that was in the Justice Reinvestment Bill that changed the technical violations for furloughs to be significant and violent, and having that language be very clear. So because of that change, they started categorizing it differently on the spreadsheets that
Yeah.
they kept, and now in alarms.
Yeah, and so that's why you see different lines in different years is your policy.
So you could see it for
Yeah.
community supervisory type. Okay.
Yeah. Let's go to restorative.
Probation. One more, this one. Restorative justice.
Yes.
This gets a little bit to, I think, to the question you were asking earlier in the day. Yeah.
So this is the first time you're going to see all of the restorative justice in one spot. Right, it's been very hard over the years to kind of map out all the restorative justice programs. Where are they? Who's funding them? What do they do? I just want to give a shout out to the Attorney General's office and Ann Walker in particular. They had the best data out of everyone. Apologies to DOC, but they honestly had the best data. And I just want to say, yeah, I'm happy. So we did this by who funds the program. And if we go to let's go to Department of Corrections, start there.
Yeah.
And so again, we'll talk about the data quality and what they did include, and it changes at some times. And then go to funding. That one, yeah.
Here, okay.
So this one you can actually, and you go to the bottom of so it'll tell you how much everyone's getting, and then just go to the last page. I think that's where it is.
That's what it is. Okay.
Yeah.
And then.
And then I'm telling you right here, how much came from justice reinvestment and what the percent was of the overall budget
During that fiscal.
during that fiscal year.
of their budget.
No, of the budget for
total
this,
budget.
of this total budget.
Yeah.
So, right, of the total justice reinvestment, of the total funds that were funded by DOC, programs that were funded by DOC, this amount, 317,000, that was 11% of that 3 million.
We got the breakdown, but we didn't get the breakdown that was like, this came from justice reinvestment and this did not. So we just added it to the bottom there. But
Yeah.
just so you could see, what the percentage.
What the percent is of justice reinvestment funds that are going to this particular funding stream.
Right.
Other folks were able to give us, like the network, they had some money from.
Yes. We have that up in that section.
Yeah, so, you know, we may not be able to tie it back to somebody else's whole budget. DOC obviously has really good records on this stuff. So we are telling you at least what we think is how much of that's coming in. Yeah,
And we have all of the AGO programs.
all the AGO programs, pretrial services, and then you can also see the outcomes as far as, you know, so what crimes are being referred, and you can choose again, the programs up top, so
So there's a lot of programs.
there's a lot of programs that the
Yeah.
Attorney General offers,
Yeah.
the crimes that are going there, and then the outcomes by race, gender, I think age. Yeah, so if it's blank like this, just choose one, and it'll. Yeah.
Tamarack, you can see here.
Successful and unsuccessful participation or did not engage. So these were, and then if we go down farther, you'll see younger folks. Gender, and then I do age groups as well. So you can see which age groups are doing well. And it tends to be either those over 70 or younger folks are doing really well in restorative justice. And those younger folks are really important because those are the ones that have a lifetime to a longer lifetime than those of over 70 to see. So Department of Children and Families, their data was a little.
Just the BARG program.
Just the BARG program, yeah. And so one of their years was not. Yeah.
So they were keeping their data on state fiscal year mostly, and then they switched to calendar year, and it was difficult to match it.
So we just-
23 not here right now.
Yeah.
We're still in discussions with them about it. Same with their budget. So we don't have their actual budget information for those years because when you started to get into 23, 24, they combined a bunch of different timeframes. So,
so those are like the big ones. There's also stuff on out-of-state and in-state beds, stuff on how many of the population are getting medication or other or medicated assisted treatment or mental health treatment, and actually go to the beds for a second. And that's okay. If somebody disagreed with what I did and the Department of Corrections did disagree with the calculation that I made, they told us, they didn't give me another one. I still think my calculation's good. So we said, they don't like it, I like it, and you guys can decide.
So, we told you that.
We told you that they did it right. We did our best to incorporate the way that we've always worked. When we're working with your data, you're the experts in your data. We're gonna do what we do, and if we disagree, then we'll just say that we disagree. And so that's it. And what we disagreed on was how to calculate how many beds were in service. Because you asked us to calculate how many beds were out of service at any time. That's not a number that they keep. So we looked at a particular number that's published, said this is how many beds were available. These are the beds that you're using, therefore these other beds are unavailable. That's just one way to do it.
One, for some reason,
It's
taking a little bit longer to.
So, the other ones that you may be interested in, there's one on transitional housing, and we give you a map. And so on geographic justice, you can look to see how many transitional housing beds are available per the population in that county. And it turns out that there's more beds available up in Newport than in any other part of the state. And even though Springfield has a lot of transitional housing, it's looking at, what's available by gender, by race, by type of crimes, by gender, by types of crimes accepted, and where they are located, at least in the county. So that's what we did for you. And we want to say that this was funded by the Bureau of State Justice Statistics grants, because you guys didn't fund it.
So.
We find funding elsewhere.
I will say, yes, the majority of the funds, as you can see, I
Yes.
put it up there because it did come from the State Justice Statistics. The Department of Corrections did give us
Yes.
money to start because we would not have been able to produce this report by November 15th, given the timeframe of this grant. So, we were able to start working on the MOUs and getting the data, which takes a long time. As Robin mentioned, we were working with the judiciary for quite a long time. This isn't a slam against them to get that bail data. And we got it a month before the report was due.
Yeah.
And that's just the nature of this work. So we're thankful for that. And then now we have money from the Bureau of Justice Statistics. Probably a different conversation with you all about the future of this report and funding that would be needed to produce the 2027 version and even maybe update this, but I don't think you probably want to get into.
Well, no, I'm curious. I mean, so the Bureau of Justice Statistics is paying for a certain period. Are we going to see?
So we get these, so your Act 40 said you wanted a report on November 15th of this year and a report in 2027.
Okay.
Okay, and so these grants are annual grants that we have to apply for. They have to fit into the Bureau of Justice Statistics, goals and conform to and there's still work we need to do to be able to make this, to put our reports to them. But they're annual reports, annual grants, and they typically don't refund you to do the same thing. Now, it's possible we might be able to say, well, we're going to add on to this, or we're going to get new data sets. I mean, there is something, but we would have to work with them to see whether or not that's actually possible for us to do.
And the way we use these grants, so all the coding, all the stuff that goes on behind the scenes is done. So unless somebody changes something and where DOC did change something, they put a lot of stuff in OMS, so I would have to recode that. But a lot of people aren't going to change things. So I just add another year and it takes me an hour.
Right, that was, I guess, my question is this.
Yeah, so this paid for a lot of my work. right? That then, and this is how we tend to use these grants every year. It pays for me to do the heavy lifting, and then we can do it cheaper the next time. And all of this is open source. We're not using anything proprietary. Everything is reproducible. It's actually all done in this program called R, and using something called Porto. And so there's nothing.
That's true if you want the exact same
Same thing,
report that we
right.
just provided you. So one of the things that we are hoping to do, because it was part of Act 40, was to get a data set from the Department of Labor. So we've talked to the Department of Labor. We know what we need to do. It'll also be, you know, a long process. It may involve paying them depending on how much data we want to get from them. And other types of analysis, anything that would be new. So yes, technically, if we got the same exact data sets that we received the last time, it wouldn't be anywhere near as difficult to reproduce this. I'm not sure that that's ever happened. So.
Yeah.
So I guess, I mean, I think this report is great. It's nice to see what has happened, but I want to see look at the report in part to guide some policies, but I want to see how those policies are affecting so it sounds like this could be ongoing work. We could have this information annually, although we may have to come up with money at some point.
You don't want it annually.
Biannual.
Right.
However.
Yeah, I think that things don't change
See
that
trends,
fast.
right.
Yeah, right. So where Ben's raising his hand. I don't know how to.
Well, just to interject, I don't mean to.
That's all right.
Part of the reason why this report was fashioned to be every 3 years is because of the definition of recidivism
Yeah.
in Vermont. And so because that kind of controls a large set of the data, that partially explains why it's every 3 years.
You know, and
What happens if we change the definition of recidivism?
well, you'll see, read our section on recidivism.
and
We're gonna get to
statistics,
that
and you'll see
page.
why you should.
And we should. You
Yes.
should. And we can certainly talk to you more about that.
Yeah.
And there is some
If you don't, you're gonna have one, right?
there is some additional analysis that we
Yeah.
need to do for our report, justice statistics. And when we have that completed,
Yeah.
we'll certainly bring that forward to you as well.
Yeah, I think it depends on how, I've been around long enough and I know that, Representative Emmons, you remember the DOC book, the facts and figures, and we used to do the DUI book. Yeah, John Perry, right? And the DUI book, and we used to do it, so we used to produce annually these physical books. DOC did the facts and figures, and we did some other books, right, that you guys used to carry around. And they were, like, that was before these things were really carried around. Those are a lot of work to do on an annual basis. And so the 3 years it takes the same amount of time to do it for 3 years as it does for 1 year. And 3 years gives time for the policies to trickle in. So that's why I like 3, preferably 5, but I'll settle for 3.
Well, it gives you the trend.
Right, it gives you the, yeah.
So,
Well, I mean,
Madam Chair, may I ask a question?
Yep, go ahead, Jenny.
Okay, well, I'm wondering this, this is an amazing report. There's so much here. You could
Thank you.
look at it for months and months and months and use it for all kinds of policy and practice decisions. My question is, how can we make it possible for the judiciary or public safety or a DOC to utilize a report in a very pragmatic way, so that we can call recommendations from the report? There's a lot of data, and it may make suggestions about how to change practice or systems. So that's my question. What money, what resources might be needed in order to allow for policy recommendations to be pulled out of this? Or is that something that you can do from CSG? Crime Research Group, sorry.
CRJ.
We get confused.
Yes,
Yeah.
CRG.
Yeah.
Got my letters wrong. Can you do? And I'm also thinking that this is an opportunity for AI, though we don't want to talk about that. But
Right.
so just that kind of general question. what resources, how could it be used? Because obviously, I don't think any of our folks in judiciary or DOC or public safety has the time to really use the report as effectively as it could be used. And I'm asking the question for two reasons. One, I want to know, what's needed, and what are your suggestions from CRG? And two, is there anything that we can put into our letter that we'll be talking about in a short period of time?
Well, I think, I don't know how to answer the question. We can't speak for DOC, GC, or anything. Don't speak for anyone except for ourselves. And I think the use of this report is that instead of me going into your individual committees and talking about things, right? And somebody having to watch, what did Robin say in this committee? And, oh, she said something over here in this committee. Here's everything. You all now have the same common language, the same common data. And I think that's the value. That when somebody comes in with different data, you have this data to go back to and say, well, this is what Act 40 says. Why do you, and some people may be using slightly different data, and we're certainly always honest and transparent about why there are differences. But I think that's the benefit, ma'am, is that everyone now has the same baseline to have these policy conversations. And that,
I get that. And
Yeah,
I think, yeah, it's absolutely terrific for that. Clearly terrific for that. And when I see data, I also want to know that our policies are data informed. And sometimes it's difficult within a session. Our sessions are extremely
Right.
short. It's very difficult to take the data that we get and to translate it to policy. It's also, it might mean that there's another step here available for our judiciary or for our DOC or public safety or some cohort that would use the data and develop policy recommendations. So I don't know whether anyone is talking about that, whether that's possible, whether you've done that in other areas.
I mean, for this report, we've also had some meetings. We had a meeting after we released it, and we had some members of Community Justice Center. I mean, basically the people who provided us the data so that they could come and talk to us about it, and they could understand how they could use it, similar to what Robin was saying. So that if they're in a committee room and they want to refer to data, they can just access the report and show it to you during that time period. And
I think it raises a lot of more questions than it answers, right?
Yeah.
And so this is the first time you're seeing these data in this way. And so we pointed out some disparities on race and age and gender. And so, well, I point them out. There's no policy answer there for you because we have to do more research. As you look at these reports with the lens of your committees and the things that you care about, you're going to come up with more questions. And I think that's where we're going to be able to move the conversation forward, but we're not going to come up with policy answers, I don't think, from this report.
That's our job. Right. And I do think that was the intent of this report.
Yeah.
As I recall, you were all talking about it in 2023, and even what's sort of in Act 40 is to support decision making.
Yeah.
Martin?
Yeah, I mean, this may be going into part of our next conversation, but it seems like we should think really hard about whether we want the Coordinated Justice Reform Advisory Council to go away or shift what they're doing to continuing to give us input on policies. And they could certainly use this report to inform that work going forward. But that's probably a bigger conversation. But I would suggest one of the things that we say in our letter to the committees is to consider what organization, because I think we need to take a bigger look and decide, what does the Sentencing Commission do? What does RDAP do? What does this council do? Is there just too much overlap? Do we need to coordinate that better? Especially we have this great information now, but we have limited time in our months there. It would be great to have an organization like the council work with this data and come back to us.
He's already taken it.
Ben knows.
Something along those lines.
Over there.
I think
This-
that's a great suggestion. It does keep the data in front of folks and help us use it properly.
It really will give a guiding light to some of those committees to use the data.
Mhm.
And, you know, we're
Not be aware of it.
more than happy to come in if there's a specific report you want to dive into. You know, definitely call us once the session starts. We're happy to come and talk to you more about it or any collaboration.
And more.
Yeah, well, I know, it's just like live in your room, but you know.
You know, I just want to point out, might as well go down, but if you're on one of the report's web pages and you click on crime research, that'll just bring you right up to my email and you can just email me right from the report. So,
Well, thank you both. Thank you.
our pleasure. Always happy to be here.
I'm sorry it's so warm in here. A little.
Thank you.
So Ben, I know you were still clicking away, but we'll finish up with you. Yeah. So to allow Ben some time to write this is our last meeting of this year. And I want to thank everyone for all your work that you've done. And, you know, we did have a start, and it's a little different than what we anticipated, but we all worked through it. And we did some good work. Irene, I wish you the best. Glad you've been on this committee and also institutions committee, and I hope to see you again. So I want to thank you, but I want to thank everyone for all that you have given to the committee. It's been really helpful, and I think we've been very productive, and we've kept Ben busy, which is good. He's still working.
I'm just logging on now.
So this, we don't really have to give a report or recommendations per se, but we've just delved into so many issues that we felt it was really important to give those standing committees in the House and the Senate some food for thought in terms of what to look for. And I hope the commissioner comes back, because I know he's got some concerns about some of the language here.
Okay.
Just one comment. While you were complimenting others, I'd like to compliment the chair for her good work during the
Thanks, Al.
interim session. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Jimmy.
Hello again for one last time this interim.
Oh,
Yes, for the record, Ben Obrowski from the Office of Legislative Counsel. So I've taken what I believe were the committee's thoughts and tried to distill them down into some more points to insert into the letter. As you see, I've tentatively struck point 1, but left at least the language there for further consideration. I've left, I've inserted the raise the age concern, so that it would be recommended to encourage examination of the implementation of raise the age, including issues with staffing and recruitment, information technology capabilities, and facility design and construction.
could you make it just a little bit bigger?
I can't.
I mean, I can read it there. It's just a little bit.
Let me get rid of the tab back in. Point 3 now includes to reassess the viability and composition of the Coordinated Justice Reform Advisory Council to provide any criminal justice reform policy proposals beyond its prospective repeal. That was my attempt to get at what we were just talking about. To appropriately resourcing restorative justice programs, including pre-charge diversion, expanding the pretrial supervision program statewide, regular updates on the implementation of the 1115 Medicaid waiver from the Department of Vermont Health Access, the Department of Corrections progress on reentry and transition planning initiatives, including substance abuse treatment and transitional housing to help curb mortality rates for individuals reentering society. Points 8, 9, 10, and 11 all remain the same as before. just renumbered.
So if you can go back up to number 5, expanding the pretrial supervision program. DOC is supposed to come back with a plan on how to do that. So I wonder if it would, instead of looking at expanding, looking at DOC's plan,
Assessing the plan.
assessing the plan. And then Bob and then Martin.
I hate to do this so late in the afternoon.
Go for it.
Number 4, appropriately resourcing restorative justice programs, including pre-charge diversions. Refresh my memory on that.
Recharge diversion just passed this last session, that essentially where there's enough evidence to indicate probable cause to charge a crime, but prior to actually filing that charge, individuals can be placed into pre-charge diversion that essentially has them account outside of the criminal justice system through CJCs and other restorative programs to account for the wrong that they had done.
And the first part of number 4?
Restorative justice programs include
Resourcing restorative justice.
basically fund them.
We should have
So-
kind of amended the whole
Now,
funding
we
of
had
that.
Will, the Attorney General's office from the Vigilant, explaining the resource needs. We've had DOC coming in to explain what they're using resources for and such, so. We have the program, we just have to make sure it's got some funding.
From both
I
ends.
mean, do you want me to just be more explicit and say funding?
I think it's fine the way it is.
Just incognito.
So the only thing I'd say is that, well, number 3, if I,
Mhm.
is I'd get rid of beyond its prospective repeal, because we have one recommendation that says repeal it now. We have in law that says it's going sunsetting in 28. I don't think we need to have that last bit.
So, and I know the Commissioner of Corrections has some questions about, if you go to the next page, there was a couple there. Yeah.
I'm sure Emmons, you're my client, not that.
He brought this to me. He wanted, he had a question that he wanted to ask. I think it was.
Different numbering scheme that you've added.
We've added-
Yes.
So I wanted to ask about, let me tell you what they are and you can tell me which number they are.
Sure.
The Department of Vermont Health Access Operating Correctional Healthcare rather than the Department of Corrections.
0.8 now.
Okay, 0.8. I'm curious to hear, I'm not usually in the position of asking the committee question, but I'm interested in what that means, because DVA, the Department of Vermont Health Access, is the state's Medicare and Medicaid agency. They're not actually a healthcare provider. So what's being asked? How would they run a health system, I guess, because that's not in their current area of responsibility.
Well, they administer payment and provision of services. So it's a matter of what kind of administration can they offer?
To the Department of Corrections,
Yeah,
right?
I mean,
Yeah.
I'll be the first to share with you that we have significant challenges in providing healthcare and correctional systems, but typically that's not on the kind of administrative side necessarily, it's actually on the provider side. And getting care and stable staffing of healthcare providers.
okay, this was my question. This is something that I put in, so you can blame me and that's okay. I guess thinking about the state currently has a robust blueprint program and accessibility to care through the blueprint. I don't know whether that's part of the way healthcare is currently delivered in corrections, or do I have the suggestion that it should be? But rather, this is an opportunity for DVA to offer some suggestions. So it could be purely administrative oversight, or it could be something different.
Okay, I think it makes a little more sense to me. I appreciate that. Don't worry, Senator, I won't blame you. I'll continue to blame.
It's okay. I get blamed for everything, so.
I guess my recommendation then would maybe change the language to asking DVA for recommendations on how to improve operation of correctional healthcare, and that I think might encapsulate blueprint or other, private option, public option. Which I think is the genesis of your question or what you're trying to get at. Is that right?
Yeah, it is. And I mean, it may go to the extent of administration and oversight. So don't want to leave anything out, but yes, I think the language could be improved. Ben usually is perfect, but no.
Okay, he's thinking.
It might be perhaps not to be too pedantic, but I believe Blueprint has been pulled to the AHS Secretary's office, as is Medicaid policy separate from DIVA. DIVA is just a payer, so it perhaps might be better to say the agency human services.
Sure, good idea.
Concerning the administration and operation.
Yes.
I think we can work with that.
I don't you want to get rid of the rather than the Department of Corrections. Oh, I see. Yeah,
Well,
that's
the
fine.
question is to move away from.
Yeah, I got it. Okay.
I mean, I could kind of adjust that so it reads a little bit better, I suppose.
I have a hunch we're not gonna really see the letter until January 8th. Okay, that works.
Okay.
Then your next one.
The broadband one,
Uh-huh.
no changes, just deeply appreciate that being included. That is a huge system drawback in the Department of Corrections, and we have worked tirelessly to try to secure that funding, and it has not, we have made no meaningful progress.
But that hasn't been distributed yet, has it, to the
We did
board?
the heat mapping, which you all funded,
Right, the
and
heat
then we
mapping.
went to the broadband board to try to get the money, and we were
Denied?
to go somewhere else.
Even
So
after the letter that we sent them?
I didn't know that.
we have not made any measurable progress with that.
We'll talk about this on Friday.
Yes, sir, thank you. But I do appreciate it remaining in the letter because I think it remains a huge, it's holding us back on vocational training, it's holding us back on our work. Education. So that was just a thank you for that. And then the other one I had questions about was requiring the department to meet with superintendents, our facility superintendents. If there's a question about whether we meet with our superintendents, we can clear that up here. The department hosts a monthly core leadership meeting, which is all of our superintendents, all of our district managers, and many of the tier below them. Our chief of operations meets with the facility leadership on a weekly basis. So if there's questions about whether we meet with our leadership, I'd like to put that to bed and I would suggest maybe remove.
I think the concern was that each facility kind of operates different. They're their own entity, and it's really dependent on who the superintendent is at that point. Seem to have a lot of control, more so of that, how that facility operates than central office. And that was some of the concern. And that this is where this came from.
Okay. Well, I can tell you that regular meetings are already organized by the central office with the secret. So in effect, you'd be requiring us to do something that we already do. I also have to say, it feels a bit like an encroachment on the executive branch's authority to administer that. You're telling the department how to hold meetings or with whom within the administration to meet with. Feels a bit uncomfortable to me, frankly.
Yeah.
Perhaps regular reports on those meetings rather than requiring the meetings.
Is there anything sensitive in these meetings that probably shouldn't be going out?
Oh, sir, I mean, yes, there's conversations, but that isn't my concern as much. It's, if it's your intent that we should continue to keep these conversations going, that type of thing, but requiring us to meet with our own staff feels a bit, it puts us in a difficult position.
So this is a letter sent to respective committees. It would basically be Judiciary Committee, Institutions Committee, DevOps, Human Services. And I think folks need to know, I mean, we have 6 facilities. And sometimes there are programs being held or available in 2 or 3 facilities. And maybe they're not available or welcome in 2 other facilities. I think that's what we want to get at, is why is there a difference there?
May I propose an alternate solution? What if your recommendation was that the committees of jurisdiction invite the 6 superintendents to testify before this time, so that they can ask those questions directly of them? What's the difference between Springfield and Northern? What's the difference between Northwest and St. Johnsbury?
Jenny? We had a poll.
I'm ambivalent about that. I think it's a good idea, but I'm not sure that the committees of jurisdiction will know what question to ask. That's all. Simply because we've heard, as the chair indicated, that different activities and different things happen in different, through different superintendents. So the goal here was simply to have sharing between and among superintendents, perhaps to improve facility organization. You're saying you already do it. I do like the idea of having some information go to committees about what is happening. And then your idea of having superintendents come in to share what they're doing would be helpful. Yeah, it gets difficult because those committees haven't heard some of the testimony that we heard.
So Ben?
I just have a question to kind of chew on while is the goal of this to really kind of create like uniform culture essentially amongst the facilities, or just, because that might help me fashion this point.
Or coordination in some way. And it sounds like the commissioner is already doing that.
I think it's coordination, and also I think when you get involved in staffing levels or you get involved in facility conditions, in one facility, the superintendent may have a certain view or perspective in terms of how you work with staff, and in another facility with a different superintendent, they may have a better relationship or a worse relationship with staff. And I think it's those kinds of issues that we're just trying to get a handle around. How the facilities operate, how they operate different, and who's in control of the facilities. Each of the facilities is under the control of that particular superintendent. And sometimes you change the superintendent and it changes the whole culture of that facility.
I also, maybe, I don't want to complicate this too much, but we consider the superintendents to be part of the central. While they functionally work in facilities, they're exempt employees who are appointed by extension of the governor. And I bristle at this idea that we should think of the central office as different than the facilities and different than the field. I mean, we are one department, and the folks who work there, we are one team, and it hasn't always felt that way, and I understand those silos that exist and have existed. But I think calling it out, it's I think symbolically sending the wrong message, that there's a gulf there that, and I think while certainly folks feel that way about the central office and line staff, I don't think that exists in the same way with our senior.
So Ben has just changed the language there a little bit. Reports on the efforts between the commissioner's office and facility superintendents. Coordinate, monitor, and address staff and
I think literally now, it's a gray area. I would just vote to remove it. I mean, they're already doing this stuff. I have more faith in the Commission of Correctional and his staff, we want to make sure these things are done. I don't understand the purpose of it. When you start talking about, well, the superintendent's this and the superintendent's that, they're already doing it. They didn't have to be told by us to do it. I think it's a bit of a gray area for us to go in and tell the Commissioner of Corrections how to run the office. So to speak, it's my opinion.
So Bob, would it be okay to say, instead of having reports, to ask committees of jurisdiction to learn about or understand the efforts that are ongoing between the Commissioner of Corrections, something like that?
How about monitor?
No,
I don't like monitor.
How about regular updates like we have at 6? Do we just want regular updates from the Department of Corrections and then leave out the relationship between them and their staff?
Not just regular updates from the superintendent. In terms of.
Yeah, but
how-
then I don't know about that, because it sounds like we're bypassing the Commissioner of
Commissioner, yeah.
Corrections and the work that he's doing. So I wouldn't go for that, but I would, I hear what Bob is saying. I think it is a gray area, but I also think that we would like to have some information going to committees of jurisdiction at least once.
Mhm.
Bob, what are your thoughts? Because you're the one that brought this up.
yeah, if we could just have a yearly or biweekly report from the Commissioner of Corrections office to the committees of jurisdictions as to what's been transpiring with these meetings, so that we do have some understanding as to what's going on there.
Yeah, I mean, so this is just a recommendation letter, so that could be the result of that, maybe some sort of legislation requiring some sort of report. But we can't necessarily, in spite of my phrasing it as a requirement earlier, we really can't through a letter.
I was following your lead there.
I know, lead you astray again.
Instead of putting in regular updates, why don't you just say updates?
Yeah.
Did it simply say updates on the efforts to coordinate, monitor, and complete address staffing, and remove the conversation about which person you want to hear from? And I mean, you're going to hear from the department, and ultimately I think it's, well, you may ask for specific witnesses, kind of us present them to you.
Well, that's it. It's up to you to present them to us. And I think sometimes it's good to talk to the boots on the ground. And some of that is superintendents. I remember one time way back, it must go, how many years ago? I hate to say 20 years ago, but it could be. We did invite the superintendents in to testify. And they were like, oh my God, this is the first time we've ever been asked to come in. And of course, they had to get clearance and approval from DOC to come in, but it was a good experience, I think, for everyone, for the superintendents as well as for that committee, to really talk to someone who is in control of a facility or oversees a facility with inmates and staff. And it's really interesting to hear those conversations with someone who has to make these daily decisions.
Topper has a question. Or representative.
Okay, Topper, we can't see you. So Topper, you have a question?
Yes, I do. The term updates and regular updates, these particular bullets are very important, at least in my estimation. And I think that we should, when you just say updates or regular updates, what does that mean? Does that mean we want an update every month? Or do we want an update every quarter? It doesn't give any direction to when that update has to be done to the people that have to do it.
Well, these are going to the standing committees. So it would really be up to those standing committees to determine when those updates and how many. Like if you go up to number 6, it says regular updates on the implementation of the 1115 waiver. We're not being clear how many regular updates. I think it's more to that standing committee to figure out how many updates they really want.
Okay, if that's what the interpretation is, that's fine with me. I mean, if I were the commissioner, I would be wondering, when do they want the update?
Mhm.
How many do I have to do?
Yeah.
But if you figure that the committees of jurisdiction are gonna make that decision, as long as they know that, that's fine.
Ben?
Yeah, and as far as, point six, monthly updates on the 11-15 waiver may not make sense, just given how long it's gonna take to implement and sort of the bureaucracy involved. Maybe it makes more sense for point 10 to put sort of a time aspect on it, but that's up to the committee.
Maybe just say during this next session. Make an effort.
I would say either 12-1 or 12-15 seems to be kind of common practice as to updates prior to the committees. Aligning updates to the committees by December 1st or December 15th, one of those days.
Oh, you mean like
This, I think we were.
next year?
I think we were interpreting for this next legislative.
Yeah, that's the lead-in language.
That's what
for
these committees should be looking at.
during review for the upcoming legislative session.
Do we need to say regular updates in number 6?
Just say updates.
Yeah, I think it's consistent with what's in 10.
Well, 10 would just have the standing committees have jurisdiction to have an update on the efforts between DOC office, between the commissioner's office and superintendents on how they coordinate, monitor, and address staffing and facility conditions. So the committee could decide just to ask the commissioner in, or they could ask the commissioner and the superintendent. So that would be up to the committee or committees. So one committee may want to do it one way, another committee may want to do it a different way. Does number 10 work better for you, Commissioner? Than what it did before?
The updates are some required. I still personally bid at the calling out different pieces within the department, but I can probably.
Okay, you're gonna live with it.
So does it all, I mean, this will go through editing and everything, but we'll take a vote on it now, or?
We have,
I gotta go, so
we have 6 people here. Does this look okay for folks, for me to sign? I wouldn't sign it before January 8th. Does this look
one
okay?
quick question. When you went to number 1, if you're eliminating that, it would change our numerical.
Do we want to eliminate this altogether or keep it?
And you included that, which you included that in number 2, implementation of raise the age, which includes staffing, recruitment,
Really design and construction.
facility design and construction. Is that fine with folks? And then we delete number 1?
Yep.
Okay, I'm saying yes. So we have 6 of us. I know we have 2 people on Zoom. I don't think Phil has come back on Zoom. We barely have a quorum. Are people willing to, do you support this letter being sent to our standing committees? If so, please say yes.
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 Chopper?
Yes.
Yes. And me.
Yes.
I second it.
Yeah, we're gonna put Bob down as a second and then unanimous.
That was done informally. It's been a motion to accept. And seconded.
This is like a nominee.
Because it's getting late and people are, it's been too hot in
Yeah,
here.
no, you can go to.
Anything else before we finish up for the year? And I want to thank everyone. And thank you, Ben, for all your work and patience. And Megan, we wouldn't be able to do it without Megan. So thank you all. Thank you, Topper. Thank you, Jamie. Everyone, please have a nice holiday. And we
You
will
as